In a place where silence served power, one small act of kindness shattered the script. The kind of place where uniforms were crisp, smiles rehearsed, and every gesture timed to please, but not to care. She was just a waitress, invisible in the eyes of the elite, carrying trays and silent burdens through halls of polished wood and whispering chandeliers. She lost her job for helping a man who seemed forgotten, just another tired, elderly guest struggling to steady his fork. But behind those weary eyes hid a billion-dollar secret. Pause. Think about that. She was punished for compassion. But what followed turned the whole restaurant upside down, not with noise, not with vengeance, but with truth, dignity, and a twist no one saw coming. Wherever you're watching from, take a breath and lean in, because this story might just restore your faith in quiet courage. Emily Carter was 27, but some days her shoulders felt older. Her hands, though steady, bore the quiet tremor of someone who'd carried too much for too long. Plates, trays, unspoken thoughts, and the weight of a world that rarely noticed her. She wore her uniform like armor, crisp black apron over a plain white shirt, but it couldn't hide the exhaustion etched softly into her eyes. She worked double shifts at La Belle Maison, the city's most prestigious restaurant, not just to survive, but to keep her younger brother in college, to keep the lights on in a tiny apartment that always felt a little too cold. Behind every polite smile she gave to a guest, there lived a dream she no longer spoke of, a life with paint on her hands, her name on a gallery wall, and mornings that didn't begin at 4 a.m. Her conflict wasn't just financial, it was emotional. She feared becoming invisible, swallowed whole by a system that valued service over soul. Across the dining room stood Mr. Donovan, the general manager, a man who operated not with empathy but with efficiency. Everything about him was measured. His stride, his tone, even the angle of his disapproval. He didn't see staff. He saw performance metrics. To him, kindness was a risk, a crack in the fine-tuned machinery of elite hospitality. He noticed when a napkin wasn't folded with precision, but never when someone on his floor was drowning quietly in fatigue. He ruled with quiet menace, the kind that didn't need shouting. Just one raised eyebrow from him was enough to freeze a room. The restaurant itself shimmered with elegance, but beneath its polish was a silence that punished empathy. Velvet booths embraced guests like royalty, chandeliers glowed with soft gold, and every wine glass sang a crystal note of exclusivity. But it was all a performance. The clinking silverware masked the divide, the unspoken barrier between those who dined and those who served. Every inch of the space whispered that some lives were meant to be heard, while others, like Emily's, were only meant to be useful. And yet, every day she walked in, Emily asked herself the same question. Should she just keep her head down and follow the rules, or risk the little she had left by listening to her heart? In a place where following protocol meant survival, even the smallest act of humanity could feel like rebellion. It began with something small, barely noticeable in the grand performance of fine dining. An elderly man seated alone at the far end of the room fumbled with his silverware, his hands trembling as he tried to steady his knife, only to have it clatter softly against the edge of the plate. Around him, polished waiters floated by, eyes trained ahead, blind to the quiet struggle unfolding in the corner. Emily noticed. From across the room, her gaze fixed on him. His coat was modest, his shoes worn. He didn't fit the usual mold of power-dressed patrons who demanded attention with every snapped finger. Her heart beat faster. Should I help? Should I wait? Her eyes flicked toward Mr. Donovan, who stood like a sentinel near the kitchen door, arms crossed, gaze cold and unblinking. She waited for a sign, a nod, anything, but there was nothing. Just the cold eyes of a man who'd long buried his humanity beneath protocols. She took a breath and stepped forward. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked gently, crouching beside his table with a calm grace that softened the moment. Her voice was warm, undemanding, and real, like someone who still believed in the weight of small kindnesses. The man looked up slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to relief. His eyes, dulled by age, brightened slightly. "Do people usually ignore you here?" he asked, his tone more curious than accusatory, as though surprised by her presence. Emily offered a half-smile, one carved from truth and fatigue. "Only if you don't look expensive." The words weren't bitter, just honest. Too honest, perhaps, for a place like this. The moment broke with the sharp sound of leather shoes slapping against marble. Mr. Donovan's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Emily," he barked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've left your station. We don't babysit guests." Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Forks hovered mid-air. The air grew tight, suffocating. Emily rose slowly. She didn't speak. Her silence screamed louder than any apology ever could. Her eyes met Donovan's, not with defiance, but with a tired steadiness. She knew what was coming. "You're done here," he snapped. "Effective immediately. Hand over your apron." No explanation. No room for truth. Just judgment in a tailored suit. She untied her apron with shaking hands, folding it with care before placing it on a side table. She didn't plead, didn't cry. Her dignity remained intact, even as her world shifted beneath her feet. The elderly man watched in silence, his expression unreadable, neither anger nor pity, just stillness, as if processing something deeper than the scene allowed. Emily walked past him one last time. She didn't look back. And still, she didn't know who he truly was. The following day, La Belle Maison sparkled as it always did before a high-profile evening, glassware polished to perfection, candles flickering like silent guards along pristine tablecloths, and staff moving with the mechanical precision drilled into them by fear rather than pride. Yet beneath the surface, there was a subtle shift, an undercurrent of unease that no one could quite place. Mr. Donovan stood at his usual post, issuing clipped commands and adjusting place settings by millimeters, unaware that the world he controlled was about to unravel. Outside, a sleek black car glided to a stop at the entrance. The chauffeur stepped out first, opened the door, and from it emerged the same elderly man from the night before. Except today there was no disguise. No modest coat, no hesitation in his steps. He walked with the kind of calm power that needed no announcement. His presence alone redefined the air. Suited sharply, shoulders steady, his eyes surveyed the restaurant with measured quiet. Donovan's face stiffened before cracking into an overly enthusiastic smile. He hurried toward the door. "Sir, welcome back," he beamed, trying to read the man's expression. "Hope you had a pleasant meal yesterday." The man did not smile. "Where's the young woman who helped me?" His voice was calm, low, and unshakable, like a stone dropped in still water. Donovan's smile faltered for a split second. "Oh, her?" She was unprofessional. "Stepped out of line. I had to let her go." He replied smoothly, his tone coated with practiced charm. The man said nothing at first. Then, with deliberate slowness, he reached into his coat pocket and retrieved a small device. He tapped once. A video began to play, crystal-clear audio and visuals captured from the face of a discreet watch camera. Emily's voice came through first, gentle and warm. Her figure came into view, kneeling beside a guest, offering help with grace, dignity, and no expectation of reward. Her words echoed across the room. "You okay, sir?" followed by that quiet honesty. "Only if you don't look expensive." Gasps stirred among the staff. Whispers began threading through the air like smoke. Someone dropped a tray in the background. The man, now revealed, lifted his gaze and spoke for all to hear. "That woman, Emily, represents everything this company claims to stand for. Kindness, awareness, courage." He turned toward Donovan, his voice now sharpened by precision. "You, however, represent everything we must root out. You have no place in my company." Donovan's mouth opened, but no words came. He looked around the room as if expecting someone to come to his defense, but the silence that followed was not the kind that saved. It condemned. A manager stepped forward, phone in hand. The HR team had already been informed. Donovan's termination was swift, quiet, and absolute. As he was led away, shoulders slumped, the very ground he used to dominate no longer recognized him. Meanwhile, a young hostess picked up a phone in the corner and made a call. Minutes later, Emily Carter walked through the door, unaware of what awaited her. Her uniform was gone, just a plain blouse, the same shoes she always wore to interviews. She stepped in hesitantly, eyes scanning the room, confused by the stares and murmurs. Why was everyone looking at her? Then she saw him, the man from yesterday, standing tall, dressed in power, not just presence. Their eyes met, and he smiled. "Emily," he said, stepping forward, "you gave me dignity when others looked away. When no one else saw me, you did. Not because you had to, but because you chose to. That's the kind of courage I want shaping this company." Her lips parted in disbelief. "I don't understand. I thought you were just—" "I am Adam Blake," he said, extending a hand, "founder and CEO of this company, and I'd like to offer you a position, not as a server, but as part of our leadership team. Help me change this place. Help me make sure no one else is ever punished for kindness again." Emily stood still, a whirlwind of emotions tightening in her chest. Behind her, the same chandeliers gleamed, but the room looked different now. She wasn't just passing through anymore. This time, she belonged. The moment hung in the air like a final note of a symphony, one that had quietly built from the rustle of napkins and clinking cutlery to this breathtaking crescendo. Emily stood frozen, her breath shallow, as the full weight of the truth settled around her. The man she had helped, gentle, quiet, seemingly misplaced in a world of glittering wealth, was not a struggling guest. He was Adam Blake, the elusive and revered founder of the very empire she had been discarded from. Her mind spun through flashbacks like fragments of a dream. His quiet questions, the calm intensity in his eyes, the subtle way he had watched everything, everyone. His thank you hadn't felt casual that night. It had felt sincere, intentional. But she hadn't questioned it. She hadn't dared. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice barely more than breath, stunned by the chasm between who she believed he was and who he truly turned out to be. Adam smiled, not with pride, but with the soft grace of someone who had found something valuable in the most unexpected place. "That's what made it real," he said, stepping closer. "You didn't help me because you thought I could give you something. You helped me because it was the right thing to do." Around them, the restaurant felt altered. It no longer echoed with pressure and intimidation. For once, its chandeliers didn't cast a spotlight of scrutiny, but rather a kind of illumination, as if the truth had pulled back the velvet curtain, revealing the cracks in its polished walls. The restaurant, once a stage for power, had become a theater of justice. From across the room, Donovan stood motionless. His face, so used to control, so practiced in condescension, was now carved in disbelief. He had built his authority on fear, not knowing it could be undone by something as fragile as empathy. Years of arrogance and assumption collapsed silently around him. His downfall wasn't loud or vengeful. It was quiet, almost poetic. The sound of someone losing everything in the moment they believed they were untouchable. But the true transformation belonged to Emily. She wasn't the same girl who had tied on her apron with trembling fingers that morning. Her presence now carried weight. She had become more than a worker, more than an employee. She had become a mirror for what the company claimed to stand for, but rarely practiced. She was a symbol now, of integrity, of compassion, of silent strength rising to the surface when no one was watching. And as she stood in that same golden light that once exposed her vulnerability, it now revealed her power. Emily's new beginning didn't come with red carpets or flashing lights. It came with an elevator ride to the 6th floor of a quiet corporate building, where her nameplate, small and freshly printed, waited outside a modest office. The walls were bare. The air smelled like fresh ink and new chances. And her desk held only 2 things: a sleek laptop and a framed photo of her and her younger brother, both laughing in front of a rundown apartment they once called home. The nerves were real. Every time she sat in a board meeting or spoke in front of a room full of people in suits, she questioned if she belonged. But with each day, each meeting, each voice she used, not to impress but to inspire, her confidence grew not from status, but from purpose. She was no longer just a voice among many. She was a voice that others listened to. In a training session for new restaurant managers, she stood at the front, not with a pointer or a PowerPoint, but with conviction. "Kindness isn't part of service," she said, her tone calm but commanding. "It is service." The room fell silent, not because they were told to listen, but because they wanted to. Her words came from a place deeper than policy. She spoke from experience, and it gave her authenticity no title ever could. Weeks later, she returned to La Belle Maison, not in uniform, but in a navy blazer and simple heels, her presence causing a ripple through the space. The chandeliers still shimmered, but this time they reflected her growth, not her fear. Near the side corridor she saw a young waitress, no older than she had once been, being scolded for spilling water near a guest. The girl's shoulders sank, her apology swallowed by the weight of hierarchy. But Emily stepped in. Her voice was soft but unwavering. "I'll handle this," she said to the manager, who stepped back immediately. Turning to the waitress, she smiled. "It's just water. You're okay. Breathe." That moment went viral. Someone had snapped a photo. Emily, standing with a hand on the waitress's shoulder, calm and composed, with the caption, "The waitress who turned the tables." It spread like fire across social media, sparking conversations about dignity in the workplace, kindness in leadership, and the quiet power of empathy. Her inbox filled with letters from women across the country, servers, single mothers, overworked caretakers, all saying the same thing: "I saw myself in you." Emily decided to speak publicly. She sat for interviews, wrote op-eds, and stood on stages where she once might have hidden in the back. "Power," she told a packed auditorium one afternoon, "isn't who you stand over, it's who you lift up." Her words became a mantra. Restaurants began reshaping training programs. Managers were taught not just policies, but people skills. The ripple of her one quiet act turned into a movement of change. Her journey, once marked by invisibility, had bloomed into something radiant. She was no longer just the girl who served. She was the woman who redefined what it meant to lead, with heart, with humility, and with the kind of strength that doesn't shout, but stands. Her arc had closed not with applause, but with impact, subtle, powerful, and deeply earned. From invisible server to visible reformer, Emily Carter had become the story that so many never knew they needed. She served others for years until life served her a purpose. Emily's story wasn't about revenge or rising to the top through anger. It was about quiet courage, the kind that doesn't need an audience to matter. Her journey reminds us that the smallest moments, offering a helping hand, choosing compassion over protocol, can change everything, even when no one is watching. In a world that often rewards cold efficiency, Emily's warmth cut through like sunlight in a dim room. Have you ever been punished for doing the right thing? What would you do if kindness cost you everything? These are the questions her story leaves us with. Heavy, real, and worth reflecting on. If her journey touched you, share this story with someone who believes small actions can spark big changes. Tap the like button if you believe that quiet courage still matters in today's world. And don't forget to come back soon for more stories that celebrate ordinary heroes doing extraordinary things. Until next time, keep choosing kindness.